Next up, I have part 2 of my interview with Dov Kelemer, where we watch him as he transitions from just being a Star Wars wholesaler into an actual distributor of the original art toys, including some of my own Mr. Toast toys that I created. And he starts a distribution business where he's moving these toys into stores all across the country and really helping with the evolution of the art toy business, and helping a lot of small independent artists like myself get their work out there. And we also start talking about some of Dov's new collections, things that weren't just childhood things, but things that he's looking at as a more sort of fully formed collector, some of the stuff that really interests him. It's a great interview, and it's coming up right now. You know, we did the action figures. Where else has this collecting taken you?
I mean, in a way, it's provided me with most things, and I could have. What it really led me to. Well, let's just talk about the evolution. So,
Yeah.
I'm collecting Star Wars stuff, having this idea that I want one of everything in the world. Then, like, I meet Steve Sansweet. And for those of you who don't know who he is the former West Coast bureau chief of the Wall Street Journal. He starts collecting sci-fi toys pre-Star Wars. When Star Wars starts, he decides he wants one of everything. He eventually retires from a job at the Wall Street Journal, takes a huge pay cut to go to work for Lucasfilm for some job that they made up for him, fan relations or whatever. And now he has a place up in Petaluma, California called Rancho Obi-Wan, which is now turned into a nonprofit. And the piece of property that he bought had these chicken coops on it, these long buildings that used to have chickens in them, which he's converted into this museum. And if you go to Petaluma, you can buy tickets and go see it. I would go over to his house when he lived in Silver Lake. And that is the best cure for wanting to collect one of everything. Because when you see the depth and the breadth and the scope of all, like when you see like Ewok soap from Turkey or Holland, or and then you just say, why? Like, well, I don't, and then so that goes back to what we spoke about last episode, which was in 1993. I bought my first painting, and once I bought my first painting, I realized that having a piece of art on the wall was more interesting to me than having plastic on the shelf. And that's when I became an art collector. And pretty much once I sold my vintage Star Wars collection and put that down payment on the house, almost everything got sold. And I don't have too many regrets. Like I did save a few things. My loose figures that we talked about. The one thing that I do have regret, and I feel like most of my collecting is motivated by regret, fear of regret.
Yes.
Oh, should I keep this? Oh, I gave that up, and which is not a gung-ho attitude like, hey, let's go, just, willy-nilly start doing stuff. It's this very, I'm sure you've experienced this very,
Hourly.
deep meditation on like, what is this item and what does it mean to me and why do I need to have it and what is its significance to me and my life and to the rest of the world? Will this appreciate in value? Do I care if it appreciates in value? Do I like it just because it's worthless? Do I like it, because quite often you have things, a lot of the things that I collect now, I collect, bootleg Garbage Pail Kids. Anytime an artist uses a Garbage Pail Kid theme on their business card or they make their own cards, and I'm tracking down a dude in Boise, Idaho, who has a tattoo shop, and he's got a Garbage Pail Kid on his business card, and like I'm trying to get him to like put one in an envelope and send it to me.
Like right now, you're trying to do that.
Sure, spending this time trying to get this ridiculous thing, right? Which I do have an Instagram for at bootleg GPK. at bootleg_GPK. And this is so much fun, right? And the stuff is not worth a lot. It doesn't require a lot of resources, and to me, part of it is like super real because it's not something that was manufactured for a collector. Some of them are. Sometimes there's an artist who makes a set of cards that is, Garbage Pail Kid inspired, and it's meant for collectors and a collector's market. But a lot of it is just, something I got the other day. There was, a coronavirus inspired can on a can of beer with what's his name, Fauci, like in his, with an atom bomb like exploding, and you can't ship alcohol over a state line, so I had to. There's a brewery in New York, so I bought a case of it and I shipped it to my friend in New York, and he's got to, poke the holes in the bottom and empty them and clean them. But then I emailed the brewery. I'm like, hey, I'm going to post this on my Instagram, which is very helpful if you have an Instagram and you can help promote other companies. So for $20, he sent me 100 flat beer labels.
So now you're basically trying to collect ephemera at the point of its conception, as opposed to waiting for it to become ephemera.
Yes. And then taking a little page out of the Dan Goodsell book, like, when it's affordable or when people are tossing it, just grabbing a stack of 50 or 100 of it and putting it away, because the cost is next to nothing. And it just gives me stuff to trade with other people. And as you know, from every other hobby that is developed, starting with Godzilla to Star Wars to you name it, it's like the bootleg stuff starts out being worthless and nobody cares. Yeah. And then the bootleg stuff starts becoming more expensive than anything else out there. Once the high-end collectors have achieved everything, once you have every Japanese Godzilla that you could possibly have, then people realize how rare the bootleg is. And then the charm of the bootleg that just it's not quite on book exactly, and it's just a little bit off. And so, excuse me. So I find myself having fun with that, and the fact that it is worthless makes it appealing, because sometimes, what my overall point was, that you have a collection of something, and I currently have a painting right now by an artist whose work is selling for astronomical amounts of money.
Yeah.
And I start looking at that, and I say to myself, well, at this price, this is not life after taxes and whatever, it's like, this is not life-changing money. But if it gets to a certain point, as much as I love having this, it starts to become a liability, right? Imagine you have a painting worth, I don't, but imagine you had a painting in your house worth $1 million. Like, well, gee, this could improve the quality of my life, like more so than my love for this painting. So
it's too expensive to own at a certain point.
Exactly. So that hasn't happened yet. I have a couple pieces like that are potential candidates. And, if it happens, then I'll be sad to see them go. But, I got a mortgage to pay. Like, I have interest that will, it will change the quality of my life if, I were to get a huge chunk of money like that. So.
Yes. Now, you said you bought your first painting in what, 93?
Mm-hmm.
And what was it?
It was from the top Star Wars galaxy. I can send you a photo so you can cut it in now.
I'm not going to do that.
I'm not going to do it. It was by an artist named John Muth. It was for a trading card, and I already loved his work before this. John J. Muth. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
And he was a painter. He did the first completely painted comic book, and it was a painting of 21B, the medical droid, holding up Luke's hand, kind of in a very Shakespearean kind of look. And it was like $900, and that was 1993. $900 was a lot more money than when I was 20 years old. And I got a call like, I don't know, 2-3 weeks later from Lucasfilm, offering me $3,000 for it. And then I was like, No, thanks, but
No thanks.
I know I had stumbled into uh, the right venue, but it also made me feel good. Like, and the paintings that I got in the next few years, I have virtually all of them, and um, they're still some of my favorites, more so than pieces I've gotten recently. Like those, there's some that I sold off that didn't have much meaning, um, because I remember I had the covers to. Uh, I had another Star Wars collector friend who was trying to raise money to buy another piece, and he had the three covers for the Lando novels. I don't know if
Okay.
there was three Han
Not
Solo
familiar.
novels, and then there was three Lando novels, and they were huge. They were 24 by 36, and
Oh wow.
I did a stupid thing and just offered a low price, and then he said yes, and I was like, ooh, and then I had to come up with the money. But back then it was very different. Like
Because
when I was
nobody caught up to that. Those being real serious collectibles.
well, there was obviously there was that element to it, but I mean, at that time in my life, before I bought a house, when I was living at home, if I had to come up with $10,000, that wasn't that hard.
Sure.
I could just get on the phone. I could sell that and that. I know this guy wants that, and it was amazing how quickly I could raise money in the 90s. Like it was unbelievable. Like, um, and that I ended up those Lando paintings just they didn't really do it for me, and I ended up selling them to Lucasfilm. Um, but then that was the last time that friend ever sold me art, because he just once he knew that you could do that, he just went straight to Lucasfilm every time he wanted to raise money. It's like, oh, I have art from like the Heritage Collectors plates, and he's like, oh, I'll sell it to George, like that kind of thing. Um, so and then once I bought a house, the art collecting totally changed. I had no money to spend. I could not come up with thousands of dollars. Uh, in today's value, the house was an amazing deal, but it was still the monthly payment was still out of control, and that's when I really focused on the political art because so I collect political art with Star Wars references. So it's anytime someone tries to communicate a political message with a Star Wars theme.
So it's a lot of you show me some of it. It's
A
like
lot of
editorial cartoons, stuff from Mad Magazine, a
sure.
lot of, like smaller, less painting, less sort of
Right.
homage stuff as opposed to parody and, sort of
Right.
illustration work.
And I could get an original if I saw an original in the paper, or even online at that point. You could just it was very simple back then because every newspaper had a political cartoonist on staff. You ask for the editorial desk. You say, "Can I talk to I don't know whoever?" And they just say
You
hi, and
you
then you're
just
like,
you literally call them on the
you
phone.
literally call them on the phone. It's like, "Hey, I
Oh
saw
wow.
that thing last week. How much is that?" Like $300, and then you could buy a original piece of art like for hundreds of dollars versus thousands of dollars. So, um, and then eventually, like I got back to like buying art again. Um, but there was definitely a period in there where I was sweating a little bit, and Star Wars art was not a priority.
You had to look up at those paintings some weeks and go like, is this your week to be gone?
Right.
Um, okay, and the house leads us to your other big business venture, which were you DKE Toys this whole time?
I was
When
DK Toys, but I wasn't distributing designer toys. Oh, and so the I guess the whole story where I started talking about Steve Sansweet came
oh yeah,
about with this was all one 20 minutes just to get to this one point was the
yeah,
so in the pursuit of art and in the appreciation of art and in the I mean, there's like nostalgia. Like the
Mm.
vintage figures, I have a lot of nostalgia for them. You can see, behind me, like there's a lot of homage to vintage Star Wars figures. Collecting a lot of art related to that. But once you learn about licensing, and the one thing that Lance did from Star Force Collectibles back in the day is he would just call Lucasfilm and get the licensor list, the licensee list,
Yeah.
and he would just go through and order pencils from this person and this, sleeping bag from this person and a lamp from this person, posters and T-shirts and and just go down the list. And every year there's a new licensing list, and you realize that Lucasfilm, that's how they generate most of their money. If you own intellectual property and can license it, it's amazing money where you sit on the couch and you don't have to do too much, and people just keep paying you money. And that's how, think of the output of movies from Lucasfilm, right?
Yes.
Not a lot, okay, and most of their money came from licensing. And so licensed product to me started to just lose. It's like, all right, I have the talking alarm clock from 1980 or 1979. Like, now there's a new clock. Oh, but they're making 10 different clocks, one for each character. It's like, do you need all 10 of those? Like, and then this, unfortunately, the way the business works is once you get a Star Wars license, that actually puts most of those companies out of business. Like, the license fee is insane. Most of them can't reach, people are competing for that license and they have to bid high, right? And say, well, we're going to sell 10,000 units, and they only sell 5. Their royalty rate just doubled, and just they're done. And Star Wars has put so many companies out of business, as far as I can tell. And so, in the early 2000s is when designer toys starts to bubble up, and then now, I was a Frank Kozik fan in the 90s. I had his silkscreen posters on my wall.
And did you know Frank? Did you know him at the 90s?
No, I'd gone to a signing once and had him sign some stuff, and I was just fucking afraid of that dude. Like, he just looked like he was gonna, he could not give a shit. Like, if you were like on fire, like it looked like, he would just jump across the table and pummel you. Like, he just, imagine him like now, but just like younger. Like now it's like tempered a little bit. Like, it's weird. Now I'm like friends with Frank, and he comes over on Thanksgiving. It's very surreal. Like, I was like afraid of this dude. But he started making toys. He had a Bear Brick. He put out his Smoking Labbit with Bounty Hunter, and then with Metacom. And this was very interesting to me because now here's a movement of toys where
it's a blending.
The creator is being credited, and not only that, it's not based on a licensed property. It's based solely on this person's art, and that was just very appealing to me. And when you looked at the stuff on the shelf and you saw this toy with the artist personality like imbued in this piece versus another figure, well, they ran through all the characters, so now we're going to do them in silver. Yeah. Right? And it's like, oh, and faced with the potential need to collect all 24 figures again in silver, and then now they're going to gold, and copper's next.
There's only one out of 100 of the gold, and then the platinum, there's 1 in a million, and yes.
And then these designer toys really started to appeal to me, and I had already been doing wholesale sales in Star Wars. I knew a bunch of people, and it was Star Wars that paid the bills, right? It was Star Wars that allowed me to buy a collection. You have a limited amount of money to spend on a collection to try and make your money back, and they can make a profit on top of that. And that margin was good enough to pay for an employee and I'm still working out of the house at this point. So because all of the bills were paid and there's an employee there, the idea of being able to take on the sales of, another product line and only be making a small sliver of a margin was possible because the infrastructure was paid for.
Okay.
Do you understand? Like if you had to
Yes.
start it, if you were working on a 20% margin, right? You would have to have, I don't even know, you'd have to have $500,000 or $1 million in capital, right, invested just to try and make 10% back on that every year, right, in order to just pay your bills just to survive.
So
And
basically, your toy business demanded that the Star Wars toy business demanded that there was a person working and the space, but that did not absorb all that time and energy, and so you basically build. So you got this sort of free billing off of that through this other by
I
doing the
mean,
other company.
there's already a corporation there. There's already an accountant on payroll, not on payroll, but there's already an accountant and a bookkeeper, right? There's already a shipping account. There's already, billing and software, like everything's already in place. So for me to sell something for 100 and only, gross $20 and then after expenses, maybe have 10 left, right? That's just more icing on the cake, right?
Got it.
Um, but that's not necessarily scalable. So, you know, I'm working
Yes,
out, I'm
because
working out.
the other thing's never going. The other thing exists at its level, and so the other parallel business doesn't scale because the other
Correct.
business
Right.
would
The
have to scale also.
Star Wars business is not gonna, you know, do 10 times as much business the next year. It's gonna be, it's gonna be pretty consistent. So
So it's sort of this other business is sort of self-limiting in a sense.
in a way, and
Oh,
and and then I'm operating a distribution company out of my house with 2 employees, and my wife is, having a fit that a 40-foot truck just showed, 20, not 40-foot, a 20-foot, truck just showed up.
beep,
We're
beep,
blocking
beep,
traffic, and I
beep,
live
beep.
up on a hill, right? And I don't know why all my neighbors like tolerated me. I was very upfront. I told them what I'm doing, and for some reason, I got them on my side. When they saw a truck show up and like all this product get like shoveled into my house, they're like, "Go, Dove!" It wasn't like, "Fuck you, you're blocking the road. Like, get out of here. What are you doing?" It was quite the opposite. They're like, "Good job." Like, I don't know.
You got lucky with your neighbors.
Well, I always invited them all over, and like I did what I had to do. I kept everyone on good relations. Um, and my advice for people who always ask, who are looking to go to the next step, my advice is generally telling them not to. You know, this is it's too uncomfortable. I'm like, stay as uncomfortable as possible and start banking the money, right? Because all too often people immediately scale up, sales don't increase with that scale up, and then it puts them out of business. It's happened to numerous people. You can talk to Frank Kozik about how he had a small punk rock record label, and then he got distributed by Sony or whatever, and then boom, just tank the company.
Really?
That happened for companies we dealt with. Like, remember Mark Batty Books? We sold a ton of Mark Batty books, like all art books. They would just do crazy subject matters, Arabic tattoos, bathroom graffiti, like dicks on walls, whatever. Like, they were a great line of books, and we sold a ton of them. And then Random House came by, looked at their numbers, and said, "Well, gee, you're doing this much in sales, like, and you're doing nothing in Europe. Like, I'm sure we could double your sales. But, we take our margin, so, your price is going to get cut in half." So now I'm buying books from Random House, and then they're looking at the reports, and they're like, who's their number one customers? Like, DKE. Like, it's like, fuck you, Random House. Like, you're not doing anything you said, and ultimately, puts them out of business. So scaling up for anybody, I am not a conservative person politically, but like when it comes to business, it's very calculated, very slow to change and not really willing to take huge risks, because there's just certain ways that you can. I'm just very conservative about those things, because it can tank you, and it can tank you fast. So, I could have gotten a warehouse years before, but I didn't. And it was stressful. Like, I remember the one night where, like, a huge shipment came, and like some product had to sit outside on the deck overnight, and that was
Ah,
like that was a problem. I could, if something was crazy, deliver stuff to the Puzzle Zoo warehouse in out in St. Gabriel, and then I could rent a van and go pick that up. Or, I did that a few times if I had to, pull a favor like that. But then in 2007 or 2008, that's when I got a 10,000 square foot warehouse in the Valley.
2007, 2008. Okay.
Something like that.
Yeah, that seems
right around the time that I'm convincing you to, like, let me sell your plush to people. Like, people will want this. And you're like, no, nobody wants my toys.
That's not what the issue was. The issue was, well, I mean, yeah,
that's another show.
We're not going to do all the Dan Goodsell crazy business things that I did. Having all my Mr. Toast dolls made without tags, because I did not. I think I didn't even realize I could get them to make the tags for an additional like 2 cents, and so I didn't have them do tags, and then I was tagging them all. I don't know. I probably told you this, but the initial Mr. Toast dolls, you get them out, and you'd look at them, and some of them would look really weird, and so there was something weird about the cloth. So what I'd have to do was iron them. So I've literally ironed hundreds and hundreds of my first 3,000 dolls, because they didn't look right, and I wanted the grain of the Mr. Toast to be the right way, because I didn't want to give them to you, because I didn't want people to be disappointed with them. That was literally the reason why I didn't give them to you for a year or something crazy.
I'll take your word for it, but
why do you think I didn't do it?
I think you were just pretty convinced that nobody would want them.
Well,
I mean, we talked a long time before you finally delivered some product for me to sell, and it pretty much started selling like right out the gate. Like,
Mr. Toast, most of the things I've done have done well, and whatever. That's show's another day.
That's another show.
Yeah, we'll do a show where you get to just ask me the questions, and then I'll have to answer whatever places you want to. But you're in the hot seat today.
Got it. Anyway, so now that I have a warehouse.
Oh no! I love how you jumped 27 steps ahead.
How is that 27? I was just talking about having a warehouse, and
which is great. Let's back up to, what's your first product that you choose to distribute? Is it Sucklord?
No. The first product, I guess, kind of it really chose me. I didn't choose it.
Okay.
It was Gaston at Meltdown. He pretty much started me off in the business. And he told me that, I was going to be the Diamond Comics of designer toys.
Which you were.
And he had his finger in, and he's a divisive character, and, we get along still to this day, but he just had relationships with a lot of people, and had access to a factory early on, and just started making toys for people. And they could sell a certain number of them in the store, but he needed someone that he could trust that was going to pay him every month.
Got it.
And so in distribution, if there's anything that I was able to accomplish, it wasn't that I was a great salesperson. It wasn't that I, had great taste. I think I have good taste, but I didn't really like curate. Like I was there to provide a service, and I let the stores decide what they were going to buy, which angered some people,
Sure.
especially early on. Like people say, well, why would you carry that person's stuff? That's not a designer toy. It's like, screw you. You know, I'll sell whatever I want. If the store doesn't want it, they don't buy it. Like, and being given threats and ultimatums and, you know, all that kind of, that was stressful, but I had to, you know, that was the territory I had to navigate. Um, and early on when I started dealing with Kozik, everyone would just ask him, like, what's up with this Dov guy? And Kozik's response was, Dov's cool, he pays.
Mm,
And that's fucking it, man.
that was it.
You pay your bills and everyone thinks you're a rock star. To the point where
Yeah.
people I never met, right, are making toys. They're in another country. They're in Venezuela or Denmark or whatever. They're making their stuff in China. They're shipping me hundreds of thousands of dollars of their product to me in the US. I have no contract at the time. It's a handshake deal. Everyone gets paid. It's like 500 companies. It's like, you don't have to be a superstar. You just have to do what you say you're going to do. You have to amicably resolve any conflict. And I don't think there's anyone out there that has a legitimate grievance against, you know, there's no problem I was never able to solve. There's no one who didn't get their product back if they wanted it. There's no one who didn't get paid. And there's no one, I have like, I mean, it was my job to be sort of Swiss, you know, and be neutral and not take sides and be, you know, the kind of the problem solver. Like it would happen like at San Diego. Like I'd have this person's stuff on this shelf and, you know, this person below it. Someone would come by and was like, well, why is that guy's stuff above mine? It's like, really? It's like, you know, it's like you can have a couple different responses. It's like, well, you could try to accommodate. You could try to calm them down. Or you could be like, it's my fucking booth. I'll put it wherever the fuck I want. Like, so I don't respond that way. It's like,
Well, Dov, I'm going to tell you something which you probably already know, but maybe you discount a little bit. Your margins were so incredibly fair to every artist that ever dealt with you. Um, anybody that would burn that bridge is the world's stupidest person, and you shouldn't be dealing with them. You know, I mean, I remember, you know, it's like I would give you my comics, which were $3. You would sell them for $1.50, and then you'd give me back $1.20. So you'd be making 30 cents to touch one of my comics, and you know, I'm losing money on those comics because I understand that comics are supposed to be a loss leader because I always made all my money on the dolls.
mm-hmm.
But I, I mean, your percentage is 20% of. I mean, just beyond fair to every artist.
It's true. In the case of the comics, though, because we did have a dollar minimum, but a dollar minimum meant that it was $1 per unit, per invoiced unit. So if you have a $10 item that wholesales for $5 and I pay you $4, I'm making at least $1. The problem comes in where you have a $5 item that I wholesale for $2.50 and I pay $1.50. It's usually below cost. So what we do in that case is we just clump them together. And if I'd gotten to you, you know, while you were printing them, I would have asked you to
make them $5.
No, just to ask the printer to shrink wrap them in packs of 10.
Yeah.
So I decided to make the exception for you because we would not sell a store one comic. I didn't make 20 cents. Like they had to buy 10. I made $2, right? It did suck, and I did eat the labor of someone having to sit there and count them. But you also forgave me for, you know, not counting them all every month and giving me, you know, like extra to deal with. Like, do you know what I'm saying? It's like,
I mean, I could care less what you do with my inventory, and of course, because you were giving me such a service. I'm just like, good God.
Look, you know, like you said, it's a loss leader, but there's a loss leader for us too, right? We're trying to build a brand, and so getting people to buy the comic book. So I made $2 on the comic book, but no one came by and just bought a Mr. Toast comic book.
That's true.
They bought 50 plush and 10 comic books. So if the 10 comic books are the outreach, well, put it this way, how much money do companies spend just in promotion? Right now, as a distributor, we didn't spend money in promotion. We did San Diego Comic-Con, we did our newsletters and stuff like that, but really we didn't do anything else. So your comic book is like the handshake for all of these people. If someone buys a comic book and starts reading it, it's a very, and your plush were so inexpensive. They retail for $7, right? $6.95, whatever it was. Like, I don't know.
Like that.
So you're right, but I just kept the margin the same for everybody. And then some people would try to like squeeze me on the margin.
Squeeze you.
You know what I mean? And then my attitude was like, well, I could, right? But do you really want me making less money on your stuff than that person? Like, you want a level playing field. Like, you don't want me like steering someone to that person's product because I'll make more money. I don't want to behave that way. So I don't know, just try to keep it fair for everybody.
Well, I thank you. Okay,
You're welcome.
So Meltdowns, he's got a factory. He's making Kozik toys.
Not making Kozik toys, but he is partners. He opened Span of Sunset, which he is partners with. He is making making toys for Necessary Toy Industry. He's doing OEM projects for Mutt Pop and Blockheads and all of these other brands. And he just needs someone to refer them to. Like, he had everything in place, but he didn't have someone who could take, like, you have to make 500 or 1,000 pieces.
Yeah.
Like, this person could sell 50 on their site. He could sell stuff some in their store. What do you do with the other 400 of them? He needed a reliable person who could handle that. And I'd already been selling him stuff for years. So it was, it's just a very natural progression. So it really chose me. And I think it was the Todd Shore Bunny Duck. That was the piece that, I forgot the retail, $68, some weird retail price. I sold 800 pieces in a week. And I was like, holy shit. Like, this is for me.
And so this would have been in 2008?
This was 2005.
Oh, 2005. Okay.
2004, 2005, yeah. And this also, I guess I just have this, just kind of my theory about life. If you're someone who's in business or you're an artist, whatever you're doing, my number one rule is like, you just have to like have your shit together, right? Mm-hmm. You can't be like so far living on the edge that, the wind will come and blow you over. You have to, we can talk about Dov's rules for life another time, but
that's a 10-part series.
Yeah. Being able to go to have your shit in order and go with the flow, is a far better business strategy than saying, okay, this happened to my buddy Lance. He wanted to open a Star Wars only store, and Star Wars Collectibles opened in El Cajon, California, right outside of San Diego.
Okay.
His goal was to open a Star Wars store. That was it. If someone came in with like Hot Wheels, the answer was no. I only sell Star Wars. If someone came up with something else, like, he couldn't do it. It was only Star Wars. I have to have a Star Wars only store. So it's the people, what I realized, that people who make these rules that have to stick to those rules, when they have to stick to these rules, it makes certain opportunities go away. And if you do your job well, and most artists know this because artists cobble together a living from doing lots of different things. And a lot of them benefit when just the right person comes along and you get a good gig out of it, whether it's doing an advertising campaign or just, isn't Mr. Toast like advertising like mattresses in Germany or something like that. I don't know how lucrative that was, but do you know what I'm saying? It's like opportunities present themselves. And
When things are working well for you as an artist, you talked about it. I don't know if it was earlier in this one or the other segment. You have what I call soft money, and soft money is money that you do like some little bit of work at the beginning, and then just these checks come.
right.
And yeah, at one point I did have this weird sort of contract with German with the German bedding manufacturers, and it was the biggest company in Germany that made bedding for kids, and I was in their catalog, and for 2 years they sold they sold Mr. Toast, and I made, I don't know, a few $1,000s for really doing nothing, for doing a little design work on art I already had and sending
And,
it to them.
and so that's why I tell artists, you put yourself out there, or anyone in business. A lot of times people find that the story about the someone who has a wood shop and then they're selling their sawdust to somebody, and then sawdust becomes very lucrative. Like, there's so many businesses like that where the piece on the side is what became the thing that subsidized the main business and then became the main business itself. And you just keep your options open. If people know that you're going to get paid, like, why not? So once I had a warehouse, then I could really do closeouts.
Yeah.
Right. Then when I get the call, like, I have a $500,000 Nightmare Before Christmas toys. Do you want them? They're 10 cents each. And it's like, I'll take those. Right. And you sell 100,000 of them for $1, and then you wholesale the other 400,000 pieces out at 15 cents. Like, do the math. Like, it's
great math.
It's great. It's great math. It's once in a lifetime. I've never had a deal like that since, right? But it's kind of like that sleazy producer Robert Evans. Did you ever read The Kid Stays in the Picture?
The movie is one of my favorite movies of all time.
So he's got as sleazy as he is, he's got this great line, and he says there's no such thing as luck. Luck is when opportunity meets preparation. So if I offered you a $500,000 Nightmare Before Christmas toys without a warehouse and without a line of credit, like, I'm assuming you don't have a $50,000 line of credit, but sorry about that if you do. I'm just saying that it's not luck, right? It's like, I was prepared for that. I was set up for that. And if someone comes by and makes you that offer, you look at it, you evaluate it, say, hey, I was sweating. That was a lot of money to borrow, but it sustained us for years.
Yeah, you just that one deal. Yeah, sure. Yeah. No, there are definitely some big deals that I've made in collectibles that, you raise the money, you do the deal, and I have like 2 or 3 big deals that I did. That I bought the big cereal box guy when he was finally done. When he got to the end, he's like, I'm getting rid of the rest, and I was like, give me the number and I will fly out there and I will box up all the good stuff and take it home. And so
you left some stuff behind,
just for him to ship. Yeah, but the good stuff.
Was that the guy who did the little zine?
No, Scott Bruce. He did the 1950s and the 1960s books on cereal box collecting. He was the big guy for many, many years, and he almost opened a museum in Vegas. And when that fell apart, because he was looking for that angle whereby he could exploit the collection to make a living.
Sure. And
when that disappeared, he was just like, he had some emotional connection to the stuff, but not a lot. He actually is the guy that did the first Lunchbox book. Collecting book.
Right, but wasn't he the guy that was like collecting it when it was not collectible, and then he did the publication, and then that kind of rocketed into?
No. I mean, the first sort of guy is Dwayne Dimmock down in San Diego. You probably know Dwayne.
Oh, I know Dwayne.
You know Dwayne. We all know Dwayne. Dwayne was sort of the first guy to sort of conceptualize it, but then Scott did the Lunchbox book and sort of dealt that, and then he was like, I need to find the next big thing. And he was like, he thought, lunchbox cereal box. We did cereal boxes, and went out there. He did the legwork, that Dwayne did. Maybe Dwayne did some, I don't know, but he did the legwork, and found the people with the stuff, and filled up a whole room full of stuff, incredible stuff. And so then, when his Vegas deal sort of fell apart, he spent the next 4 years selling off the collection, and then when it got to the bottom of the collection, and he was just sick of it and wanted it done, he called me.
Nice.
And
how long did it take you to move through all that?
Well, I haven't moved through.
You still have it all?
No, I don't have it all, but I still have. The best of the best stuff. Which made my eyes fall out was the original artwork to a bunch of boxes, cereal boxes, and that primary stuff. I've never sold any of it. I mean, what like you say, will the day come when I have to sell it? Probably, because those days are always coming. But
that's when you'll do like a big auction and like.
Yeah, I mean, like you were saying about cereal. Cereal is such a niche thing. It's not Star Wars, so there's never going to be that $1 million piece or painting or whatever like that. There's not even going to be $100,000 thing. There's only going to be $3,000 to $5,000 is sort of your top end. And so with that kind of stuff, it's like, do I really, I mean, I may get to that point, but I'm not to that point just yet. I can still eat.
But did you buy it specifically to sell, or you bought it as a collector?
I mean, I bought it because I knew I could make all the money back in 3 months. I mean, it took me probably, it's like, I think I paid him half, and then I, was going to pay him the other half over time, and I had it paid off in 6 months easily.
But when you were acquiring the stuff, like I watched a couple of videos that you did when you're just going through and you're showing
all the stuff,
all that stuff. Like you're talking about how you went and you found the coupon place and you bought hundreds or thousands
the refunders.
The refunders. So that was. You were buying that stuff with the goal of selling that, or was this just collecting and hoarding?
Well, I realized, and I mean, kind of like what you were saying with that big collection you bought. I realized that there was the ability to sell the stuff. So I would, as opposed to keeping 10%, I'd try and keep 50%. And then I'd sell the other 50%, so
with the hopes that the prices would be appreciating in value
of the stuff I kept
of the 50%, or you kept the 50 because you just wanted I want to hoard as much stuff as possible.
No, because I liked it. Yeah, I've always only collected because I enjoyed the stuff and I love the stuff so much.
Right. Yeah. But I guess my assumption, and maybe I'm incorrect, was that you're getting multiples of, if you're going to the refunders, you're getting 100 of the same thing.
Like with the refunders, I remember the one lady I bought stuff from, there were hundreds of funny face packs, and so I went through all those hundreds of funny face packs and I kept one of each variation.
Oh, I see.
And so I had there was 300 packs and there was 75 different. So I kept all 75 of those. And then, I sold the other 200. And then of those 75 at a certain point, there was other collectors. And so I've pared it back down. So I just have sort of basic variations, as opposed to having every different thing on every back. Mm-hmm. Or every different, they have little different riddles on them. So I would want to have every riddle.
I'm sure we'll get into the reasons for collecting and the emotional, components of it. But
because the thing about collecting is I once you start watching the hoarding shows, I feel those people's pain, about losing stuff.
Sure, but you're not a hoarder.
Oh no, I'm a hoarder. Yes, absolutely.
That you save the daily newspapers and your cans of coffee.
the thing about hoarders, and in one of those shows, see, now we're digressing and we're getting away from the main
Those
topic, just talking about
those
you.
hoarders are keeping trash.
Yes and no. Okay, so they go to the hoarder, they pick up this pen, and they say, okay, the hoarder's like, it's my pen, my pen. And the woman says, okay, I'm going to take this pen and I'm going to put it over there where you can't see it. And, and you're going to have to sort of, or I'm going to take it home with me and you're going to have to emotionally sort of deal with that. And the hoarder, like, as you're taking that pen away, they feel like a piece of their soul being pulled apart.
And that's
And then,
you?
oh yeah,
No, come on. What do you mean?
yeah.
I've just
Not
seen
for
you
this,
not
not for this pen, but for the good stuff. Yeah,
but
it's like,
if you have that emotion for the good stuff, that's not
no, the good
hoarding.
stuff. This is the good stuff.
That's not
But it,
hoarding.
but
It has
but
meaning for you.
but it. How does
It
this have meaning for me? I love it because it's beautiful and because it's has a history.
Do you
But
think
it,
that Sharpie is like in that stack of newspapers is meaningful to the hoarder? They've created meaning, but it's there's
yeah, they've created meaning, so there's
no, no,
meaning.
no, no, no.
There's
That's
meaning.
look. I know hoarders. I've had hoarders in my family, like grandparents. Like I after they died, I had to go through their attic. Like I know what hoarding is. Like people who went through, the war and the depression, and like how people who can't throw things out. Like you've created meaning for something, and then one day it might rip you apart to sell it. But when you sell it, you're going to get a lot of money, and it's like that's not hoarding. That's 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 extreme collecting, but that's not hoarding.
That's extreme collecting.
And
Yeah.
even and then there's like a difference between like being a picker and a collector, right? So I don't do very well at conventions anymore because what I collect is so specific
You mean look to buy?
to buy or just to however you're acquiring it. Like
Sure.
I want like bootleg Garbage Pail Kids, or like I don't wander across someone's table and then just see this toy and it's a good deal. Like I don't care. Like I don't want it. It has no meaning to me. Like I'm collecting these 10 pieces trying to complete this set. If you happen to have that one thing that I need, then that's cool. But that never happens to me at a convention anymore. Like, you know, political Star Wars art, bootleg Garbage Pail Kids.
You've transcended.
Weird, resin art, action figures. Like those things have to be acquired in very, very specific ways and unearthed. Like the things that I want from people, I'm trying to get them to like go into their garage and dig through all their, trying to get a political cartoonist. Like this guy did, 3 cartoons a week, for the past 20 years. And I said, had a Star Wars reference in 2005. And he's like, what? It's like, I said, I'll give you, how much do you want for it? He's like, well, I sell my originals for 400. I'm like, okay, can you go find it? He's like, it's like every once in a while you find someone who's retired. This happened, 3 or 4 years ago. And I wanted one piece. And then the guy went through, he couldn't find the piece I wanted, but he found 10 other pieces that had Star Wars references.
Oh my god!
And I was like, score. Like, but I don't even have
happy.
I don't even have time to track those down. I have I can go get it. I have a file that has either a photocopy or a printed out image of art that I don't have, and literally it's a ream. It's like 500, and I'll call an artist and say, hey, I'm interested in these pieces, and they're like, oh yeah, I'll get back to you. And it's like I have to be on the phone nagging these people, and it's just. And then sometimes the opposite happens, right? I'll buy 5 or 6 pieces from somebody. And so all of a sudden they have Star Wars on their mind. And then in the paper next week, right, Yoda's in the cartoon. And I'm like, you dick, like you're doing this just to sell me these now. They're like, no, I promise you that wasn't the reason. I'm like, uh-huh. Yeah. Anyways, we're kind of getting
we got super sidetracked, which I knew any show that you and I would do, we would go down endless rabbit holes. Okay, so distribution business, working with artists. Man, this one's almost an hour already too. I don't know. Where
Well, then, so if you want to bring it till today very
Yeah,
quickly,
where are you at today?
so um, in 2005, uh, I think Frank Kozik posts a gay empire and a Sucklord 66 figure on the Kid Robot message boards. And this is like
Okay, it
this
wrote
is
on message boards.
right. This is like a parody of Star Wars. I had seen the Sucklord at events, walking around with his boombox. He gave me a little sticker, like, um, General Grievous has a posse. It was a Shepard Fairey, uh, spoof.
Yeah.
And, um, same thing. Like I call him, he's kind of standoffish. My check clears, and then you get the call the next time. It's like, that's the one thing I've noticed when people they're kind of standoffish is like you have to get past that one time where you just send them money and it's like you just become good to them. Right now, like he credits me for like his survival early on and paying his rent by me selling his Gay Empire action figures. Um,
Oh, so your first interaction with him was getting an item to distribute.
yeah, the Gay
Okay.
Empire action figure told him what I was doing. He's like, I don't know, and whatever. I bought a bunch of it. That was not even like a normal distribution. Like, make 1,000 figures and I'll sell these for you and pay you every month. Like it was for 500 other companies. This was a guy who was making this stuff by hand, and if I wanted them, I had to just buy them, right? Which is, if you're in a distribution business, not knowing if they're going to sell or not is not a good use of your money.
Sure.
That's actually not your job, is to finance people's production. Like it's you're doing the work of selling the stuff when everyone else is individually financing their stuff. But he's making the stuff by hand, and it's not like I spent $1,000. It wasn't like 50 grand. But they sold immediately. Like with a small number of pieces, it was not hard. And I just started collecting his stuff. It was everything that I wanted. It was Star Wars art. It was had an aspect of parody. It was irreverent. It was political, um, and it had the pop culture theme, but it was um, I don't know, like everything that it was just kind of like it had everything that I was looking for.
And
And
did it speak to the adult in you, or it didn't speak to the child in you at all, did it? It spoke to your adult collector and what, because it seems like the art, like when you bought some Star Wars art, it was speaking more to that childhood sort of love of Star Wars. That it was this next aspect. But with these toys, it seems like it's a more adult sensibility.
I think it's the toy side that speaks to the child and the art that speaks to the adult.
Okay.
And so I think when it's art of a toy, or when it is uh like I don't know if you can see those pieces that Dustin Benzig did, that are carvings of the Cantina aliens. Can you see
Oh,
those
okay. Vaguely.
behind?
Yeah.
Vaguely. Anyway, hold on.
Okay. He's grabbing one. No, we couldn't see those.
Right.
Oh, okay.
So
Sure.
here's Walrus Man, right? And I mean, this is a wood carving. I'm gonna drop it more. You can get these on his website. They're $65. He hand carves, hand paints each one.
Mm.
Right? I mean, this is a piece of art, but what is it? What is the nostalgia? The nostalgia is my childhood.
Yeah.
Which I seem to start gravitating towards the Cantina aliens, and I don't know why, but the Cantina aliens sort of.
Your first sexual fantasies. Walrus Man.
God damn.
Got you. Bang, bang.
Oh, jeez.
I was making a serious point. You made a dick joke.
Now you had to derail it. But is that never mind. And what's interesting is I don't care about the characters as they appeared in the movies. When people are doing art, it is of the action figure.
It's the action.
Which are completely different color schemes, and have this cool like 70s vibe, where the toys that have come out later, which are sculpted, precisely how they appeared in the movies, with the latex heads just a little oversized and all that stuff, like those, don't care about them at all.
So you actually have a connection to, I mean, I won't say parody, but the early Star Wars figures almost seeming like they're bootlegs because they're not one to one. There's
Well, it's just the toys that I had as a kid.
yeah,
And so the nostalgia is for that image,
yeah,
right? And the toys, because of the nature of Star Wars and how the story took place like in the middle, and so little was explained, yet they made 100 action figures over 7-8 year period, many of which these characters were on screen for a second or two. That lent itself to making up your own stories and the imagination. Now they've explained everything, and they have backstory, and they've ruined the mystery of it. And the mystery is what made it great. Like you didn't have any, you had like a few magazine articles, and you had a crappy making of book, and like you didn't have anything. Like you just, because there was nothing there. Like Boba Fett was just like, there's probably 2 or 3 lines written about him. This is what he looks like. And then he becomes popular, and then he becomes the basis of the prequel. And then every stormtrooper is a clone of him. And then he's all this kind of nonsense. Like that's all bullshit. Like he was just a bounty hunter that looked rad. And if they would have left it that way, it would have maintained its coolness. Instead, it's like they have to, in the prequels, Yoda and Chewbacca have to be friends. Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
it's like,
really? They're friends.
Yeah.
I don't even remember that.
The kid, Anakin Skywalker as a kid, C-3PO is his droid. Like,
Yeah.
no, you could have had a billion other,
Nope.
robots. Like, no, you had to. They just, it's always this, this self-referential kind of like insulated universe, and it's not. It's broad and it's big, and that's what's exciting. And then when they make it small and tiny, is when the stories just fall apart and they lose their magic. So, it is the toy and the experience that you had as a toy, or in my case, like not having enough toys as a kid. If that's the motivation, I don't know about that. Wanting to, I'm sure that's another whole show, but
Yes.
trying to like recapture that feeling that you had as a kid, but now it's not just this plastic toy. Now it's interpretation of that toy. And I think that is the adult part, meshing with the childhood nostalgia part. So now there's another artist who had the same experience that I did, right? Who connected with it on a certain level and decided to create this piece of art. So now I'm like connected to this artist in a way. Like we both had a similar shared experience. And I think that's like the connection. Unless it's something where I've asked someone to make something, and then it's like, how much? Anyway, I think that's the best way I can describe it. But I don't know.
Well, I'm gonna since that was a really interesting sort of thing we got off on, I'm gonna call this show on that story. I think we're going to do a third part at some point. Maybe it'll be right after this. Maybe it won't be. I want to thank you, Dov, because this was good stuff, and we will continue this conversation. Maybe sooner, maybe later. I think people are just going to have to wait to find out.
Suckers.
Thanks, Dov. That was great. There's a third part to this interview, which will be part 3. So look for that, because me and Dov, we have a lot to talk about. Okay, thanks for tuning in.